mantras, which is actually in Sanskrit, and teach you different aspects of Sanskrit grammar by chanting the names of the Lord. Okay, should I give you an example?
Yes.
Anyone wants to hear an example?
Yes.
Okay, let's try an example. Now, the word Krishna, right? You can have Krishna, you can have Krishnam, you can have Krishne, you can have Krishna, you can have Krishnasya. These are all different ways of understanding Sanskrit grammar. Sri Krishna Sharanam Samasta Jagatam Krishnam Vina Kagati Krishnena Pratihanyati Kalmanam Krishnaya Karyam Namaha Krishna trasyati kala bhima bhujago Krishnasya dasosmyaham Krishne akandita bhavatu me Bo Krishna tvam eva shrayah. This is an example of how Nimai would teach Sanskrit grammar. It still works. But what he did that was unique was that even while his students were hearing Sanskrit, they were hearing the names of God. So they were studying, but they were also developing spiritually. And during that time, Nimai was very young. But where he stayed, one day, there came a very powerful scholar. And the scholar was known as Keshava Kashmir, or Kashmir Keshava Kashmir. Keshava Kashmir was a very powerful scholar. He was a logician and he had defeated many people in Sanskrit. In those days, they defeated each other by way of debates. And he was a very profound and very senior scholar. So he comes to Navadvip and he's looking for competition for a fight. All the scholars of Navadvip, they are scared of Keshav Kashmir. They say he's too good, we will lose. What should we do? Let us send Nimai Pandit to fight with him. If Nimai Pandit wins by good reason, then it will look as if we are really scholarly. Because if a 16-year-old man can defeat a 55-year-old scholar, then he must be very good. If Nimai loses, it's okay, he's only 16 years old. So they were smart. And they thought they could use Nimai for that. So what happens is, at that point of time, I think I should go back a bit. Do I go back? No. One more? Now this is the closest, these pictures that you see are actually recorded, or rather they were fleshed out and drawn based on the descriptions of how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu looked. And he looks very beautiful. Right? He looks very, very exquisite. So Keshav Kashmir comes. Now, he's going to come into Navadvip and have an official fight. Nimai has been selected. But one day, just by chance, Keshav Kashmir is walking along the banks of the river, Ganges. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as Nimai is sitting down with his students, teaching them grammar. Suddenly, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu sees Keshav Kashmir and says, "My dear Keshav, I've heard that you are a great scholar. My name is Nimai. Welcome to Navadvip." Ah, yes. So Keshav Kashmir says, "Thank you. I've heard about you. I heard that you're a Sanskrit grammar teacher. And I've heard that you are very, very intelligent." So Keshav Kashmir is very proud. Nimai becomes very humble. He says, "Even if I'm intelligent, I can never defeat you in your logic and your mastery of Sanskrit and knowledge." Then at that point of time, Keshav Kashmir decides to show off. So he says, "Ask me anything you want, my young boy, and I will try." So Nimai says, "Anything?" "Yes, anything." "All right. Can you, right at this moment, can you compose 100 verses glorifying the Ganges? Can you do that? 100 verses glorifying just out of nowhere." And Keshav Kashmir sits down, he actually does it. 100 shlokas, verses. And he recites all of them end to end. When he finishes, he thinks to himself, now Nimai Pandit will run away, because now he will know how powerful I am. So he asks sarcastically to Nimai Pandit, my dear Nimai, you have heard this now, so what do you think? Do you think you can find anything there which you think is of value, or can you understand anything I've said? And Nimai Pandit becomes very humble. He says, my dear sir, what you have given is amazing, 100 shlokas. But if you don't mind me saying, at the 64th verse, in the second line, at the end, and the third line, at the beginning, and the fourth line, in the middle, there are some discrepancies in your grammar. Keshav Kashmir takes a step back and says, what is this boy saying? Can you recite to me the 64th verse first, Nimai? Nimai recites all 100 shlokas. First time, how I wish I could be like him. Imagine if you were like that in NUS. Everything your lecturer said, first time it enters your head. Man, we won't be in the lecture most of the time, right? But that's why we are here, and that's why he's there. Big difference. So Nimai says that, okay, I've recited to you everything, now let me go right into the 64th verse. And he spends 10 minutes breaking down the structure, the grammar, the nouns, the vowels, the consonants, and telling him why you're wrong. And Keshav Kashmir has to sit down now because he can't take it. He's about to faint. This is too much. A 16-year-old upstart. What is he doing? Then he starts thinking. Keshav Kashmir is a great devotee of the goddess of learning, Saraswati. And he believes that he's so intelligent because the goddess has given him that learning faculty. Now he prays in his heart to the goddess, Saraswati, what has happened? Why are you putting me down in front of this boy when I have been the greatest scholar in the land? So what does he do? He goes back home because he can't answer to Nimai. And in the night, he has a dream. In that dream, goddess Saraswati comes to him and tells him, my dear Keshav Kashmir, you are fool number one. Don't you know that the person you are debating is the object of even my worship? He is the Supreme Lord himself. And I have arranged this so that your pride can be smashed. And so that you must understand that whatever intelligence you have is not yours. It has been given by the grace of the Supreme. And therefore you must become humble. That's a good lesson for all of us, ladies and gentlemen. Most of us here are actually cream de la cream, right? In terms of the intellectual world, we are up there. I remember the first day I entered my law faculty, our egos grew so big because the dean of the faculty came in and said, do you know that there are so many students in NUS? Do you know that out of all the students in NUS, there are only 140 of you in law faculty? Do you know that out of the 140 of you, by the quota of racial quota, there are only 7 of you who are Indians? Just imagine how I felt. And that was how the dean welcomed us to law school. And we came out thinking we are the best in NUS. Once you go to work, all that is gone. It doesn't make a difference how much you have it in your head. You know, it's a whole different ballgame. But what I'm trying to tell you is, we always think that we are more intelligent than the person next to us. You will never admit it, neither will I. Outwardly, we'll always say, no, I'm not. I'm your humble servant. I'm not very smart. But at the end of all that talk, right, I'll just go back home thinking, actually, you may think you're smart, but I'm just a little bit smarter than them. That's how we keep ourselves up. That's how we feel good about ourselves. Imagine walking around thinking I'm ordinary. Nobody wants to feel ordinary. But when we do that, we forget to give thanks to the good Lord who's given us intelligence. So Keshav Kashmiri was put in his place by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. After a brief spell of studies, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu enters into his next stage of life. What does he do? He goes to this place known as Gaya. It's a place of pilgrimage, very holy place. And there is constant chanting of the holy names by everyone. And Nimai Pandit becomes absorbed in the chanting. And there what happens? He then meets a very, very exalted devotee of God known as Ishwar Guru. And there, Nimai Pandit humbly falls at the feet of his great personality. and requests him to become his spiritual teacher. In modern parlance, it is known as Guru. Guru is today an international word anyway. I don't even have to explain it to you. Everyone knows the word Guru. But in true context, it means a mentor, someone you look up to, someone who can inspire you, and someone who can guide you. And this is what a spiritual master is. Now, why did he have to do this? If he is an avatar, if he is coming straight from this transcendental kingdom, why does he need to surrender to something? Because this is where the good Lord teaches us through his life. Just like Jesus, just like Muhammad, all these great, pure personalities, apostles, messiahs, prophets, what did they do? They taught us how to live. And Mahaprabhu did the same thing. In this part of the world, Mahaprabhu simply showed us that no matter how powerful and great we may be, we must never be proud to think that we know it all. So he set the example of bowing down and learning. Have you realized one thing in your student life? When you sit before a teacher or a lecturer, and if you are learning and absorbing, you find that you actually learn a lot faster. When you skip lectures and you do correspondence courses from home, I'm not talking about actual correspondence courses, but skipping lectures and staying at home, you find that it's very difficult to get the flavor of what your lecturers are giving you. It's true. Now, supposing you had a very good lecturer, but you had this ego and you think, I want to challenge him all the time. And you keep challenging the lecturer, not for any reason of pursuit of knowledge, but just so that you try and show him how smart you are. Do you actually learn anything at the end of the day? You don't. It becomes a personal vendetta. But when a student really submissively tries to learn from someone who knows more, you find knowledge is gathered much more quicker, much more faster. And that's the value of having a mentor, the value of having a spiritual master, someone to look up to. And Mahaprabhu showed us that in his life. So then Ishwar Puri gave him the same mantra that he was chanting, a little bit of a variation, but he initiated him. That's the word that was used, he initiated. And when he initiated him, the Lord taught us the importance of approaching a spiritual master, of learning from someone who is more educated, who has more experience. Our parents are our first spiritual masters. You will all agree with me. Everything that we have got, whether we want to admit it or not, has largely come from our parents. But when we are young, when we are very young, do you remember how when all of you were young, how you adored your parents, how you put them up as heroes and heroines? Then when you came to school, your teachers became your heroes, isn't it? When you started knowing your friends and all, your parents became a little bit outdated. You don't know all this. You're listening to Elvis Presley. It's too long ago. You start telling parents, you don't know this, you drive too slow. My father, he drives at 60 kilometers an hour. And I don't drive at 60 kilometers an hour. But when I sit in the car, I feel like I should just run. I'll probably be faster. But I don't realize, I don't realize that he probably has a reason why he's driving at 60 kilometers. But I think I know better than him. And that is my defect. So very often, we don't realize that people with more experience actually teach us. That's what Mahaprabhu gave us. So when he was initiated, after that, surprisingly, you may think, Mahaprabhu got married. Sometimes you think that a very great personality in this world should not get married. I wonder why. But Mahaprabhu got married. And 90% or 99.99% of us are going to get married or already are married. How many of you are married? Boys and girls? Okay, yeah, this is a question for both sexes. Okay, that's good. You got married. That is amazing. Okay, point to note, marriages between parties are getting younger and younger. Sign of the times. Nimai Pandit gets married to a very beautiful and saintly personality known as Lakshmi Priya. And he enters what we call householder ashram. He did this to teach us one thing, that there's no wrong in getting married. Very often when we tell people to take up spiritual life, most people think, oh my God, that means I must become a monk. When I started chanting this Maha Mantra, my mother got very scared. I was 13 years old and she got very scared. She came up one day to me and said, you will give me a grandson one day, right? I was 13, huh? Right? So apart from not understanding what she was saying, I was totally bewildered. But I told her chanting doesn't mean I'm not going to get married. Today I'm married, right? Happily. I have 2 children and nothing is wrong with me. I'm still where I am. And I keep telling my mother, you remember when I was 13? I'm still here. Nothing has happened. You can chant the names of God in any institution. You can chant it in NUS. You can chant it when you go back. Right? The world can take anything from you. They can't take the power to chant it from you. That's the beauty of it. Because it's your choice. And you have the freedom to exercise choice. Just like you have the freedom right now to say, I'm leaving. That means you won't get to Sagar. No, that's not good. But you are staying. So that's your choice. So he got married. And when he got married, he didn't stop his activities of chanting. They increased and increased. And this is a very interesting part of his life. Because at this point of time, what happened was, when someone does very well in society, what happens to people around him? They become envious, isn't it? Envious. And isn't envy the greatest demon we all battle? Yes or no? Yes, definitely. Definitely. If this was a wedding function, do you think you'll all be seated like this, not looking at the person next to you? Never. If you had a wedding function or a social function, you'll all be looking at what each other is wearing, who's talking to who, why I'm not part of that group, why she hasn't looked at me, why he's ignoring me, what car did he drive? That's what we would do. The ladies would look and say, look at that lady, she's walking jewelry shop. One lady may go back to her husband and say, last Diwali, what did you buy me? Nothing. Look at her new sari. Another person may say, look at the new car and down the road, where's our car? There is no end to envy. But it happened even during that time. Many people started thinking, who is this Nimai? Dancing and chanting, what is he doing? He has a good life, he's always happy. That's the other thing we can't take. If someone is happy, deep inside, we're not really happy. We say, oh, I'm very happy for you. But inside, but if someone is sad, we pick up, yes, oh yeah, I'm really sorry. It's so bad. Then we call another person, do you know what happened? It's a perverse kind of happiness, isn't it? We'll never admit it. You don't have to admit it. But it happens. Deep in our hearts, it happens. So like that, people felt, why is Nimai having a good deal? So what did they do? They went to report his activities to the magistrate. Now at that time, Bengal was under the Muslim rule, right? The Muslims were ruling at that time, and the magistrate was known as Chan Qazi. He was the magistrate. And these envious people thought, let's get a bit of racial riots going, Let's incite people and see what happens. So they went to the Muslim ruler and said, he's chanting Hindu names, therefore you must stop him. What does the Qazi do? The Qazi is taking a walk one day along the streets, and he sees all these devotees chanting the names of God. And he tells them, stop this chanting. You should not. You have not got my permission. Stop it right now. Otherwise I'm going to get my henchmen and stop you. So all the devotees become afraid. And they go to Nimai. And they tell Nimai, the government wants us to stop it. We should stop it. We have to stop it. So Nimai says, what have we done? We are just chanting. We are not hurting. Let's do one thing. Let's all get together. Let's have a big, nice group of chanters. Get everyone, women, children, old people, everybody. Let's all go and chant. We leave our house and we chant. And we will chant all the way to Chan Qazi's house. And there we will sit down and talk to him lovingly and explain to him why we are doing this. And in that way, Nimai organized what historians refer to as possibly the first recorded instance of civil disobedience in modern India. He is no... Who's our modern activist who's been in the news recently? No. Thank you. Yes. So long before such personalities came, Nimai organized it. But he didn't organize it for a political cause. He organized it to bring people together, not to divide. You see why. So what happens is Nimai organizes everyone. Everybody comes together with mridangas and instruments, and they chant and they dance all the way to the house of the Qazi. Now if you were a ruler and you saw 100,000 people coming to your home, what do you think you feel? You probably feel that this is going to be a riot, isn't it? Yes. Now, at that point of time, the Qazi becomes afraid. So he hides. Mahaprabhu comes forward and shouts, "Qazi, come down. You have asked us to stop. We want to know why." So the Qazi comes down. Now what does Mahaprabhu do? Some people in the crowd are getting restless, but he tells them, "Be peaceful. Chant." Then he goes up to the Qazi and he says, "Why are you hiding from me?" And the Qazi says, "I'm afraid because I've stopped them. I'm afraid that you've come to harm me." And Mahaprabhu says, "Do you know something?" He uses a very good tactic, by the way. You should keep this in mind. He says, "Do you know that you and I, our ancestors are from the same village? Do you know that my grandfather was known, well known by your father and your maternal grandfathers? And you know, by this process of being related, you are actually like my nephews and I'm your uncle." The moment he said that, the Qazi became a bit more relaxed, because he could understand that Mahaprabhu was just trying to tell him that I've not come here to fight. I've not come here to cause disturbance. I've come here to have a frank talk with you. And then Mahaprabhu says very nicely, "My dear Qazi, just like a nephew sometimes will forgive an uncle who is a bit harsh, surely an uncle can also forgive a nephew who is a bit harsh." And the Qazi became peaceful. And then Mahaprabhu explained to him why chanting of the names of God is so powerful. And the Qazi asked many questions about how chanting is in the Hindu scriptures, and then how chanting is of the names of God in the Quran. And they exchanged many ideas about chanting. And at the end of the day, the Qazi and Mahaprabhu embraced each other in friendship. And the Qazi came out and promised Mahaprabhu, "Even after I am dead, anyone who chants the names of God sincerely in my township will never be stopped. We will always respect. Of whatever caste, whatever creed, it doesn't matter. But we will always respect." And today, even till today, the Qazi's tomb, where he has been laid to rest, is respected by everyone who comes to Navadvip, Bengal. Until today, nobody stops the chanting of the holy names in the place where Nimai was born. So this shows us one thing, that if you ever have problems with anyone, the best solution, whether you want to realize it or not, is actually to chant. He may not chant, but you start chanting this. And by chanting, you find that the vibrations between two parties, they become peaceful. They become very peaceful. Just to explain to you one thing, my spiritual master is from London, and he had neighbors who were constantly fighting with each other. One day he goes up to them and he tells them, "My dear sir and my dear madam, do one thing. I know you like to fight. It's part of your nature now." And they said, "Yes, we like to fight. That keeps us going as husband and wife." And then he says, "Do one thing. Every time you want to fight, just before you fight, why don't you chant the names of God? Or just when you're going to get very angry with your wife or with your husband, you just chant the names of God and see what happens." And they did it for 2 weeks. And they came back to see him and they said, "You know what? Every time we really want to lose temper with each other, we both start chanting. And even though while we are chanting, we are still looking very angry, 5-10 minutes later, we actually cool down." So that's useful for all of you. In case you go back to your husbands and your wives, or to your friends next to you, the next time you want to fight with someone, the next time you feel disturbed, you just chant. 5 minutes will pass, 10 minutes will pass, and you will become very, very useful. Try it. Now what does Nimai do? Yes. So this is the conversation that Nimai has with the Chand Qazi. You can see it there. Now we come to the point where we find Nimai has become established as a great preacher of the love of God. And what happened was, he had a maternal uncle known as Gopal Chapal. And Gopal Chapal one day wanted to discredit Nimai. What he did was, he went to the house where Nimai was staying. The person whom he was staying with was known as Srivas Thakur. Okay? He was a Brahmana, so he stayed with him. What this Gopal Chapal did was, he brought all kinds of meat, he brought wine, and he brought all items which looked very contradictory to the life of a devotee. For example, if you went to a priest in a temple, and if you're going to go to a priest to a temple and you just see him, oh, just 1 minute, I'm going to put my cigarette down, what would you do? Or if you entered into the room of a priest or a monk and you saw Marlboro cigarettes there, glass of wine over here, what would your impression be? Tricky, isn't it? Very tricky. Very tricky. Oh, by the way, I must relate to you one very interesting incident. I was on Air India Express from Singapore going to Trichy. And next to me while I was helping some people fill up forms, there was a man who looked distinctly like a priest I had seen in Singapore. Except for one difference. He had just ordered a whiskey. Now he sits next to me and he turns to look at me and he does a double take because he recognizes me. And now he's become very shy. Then he looks at me and says, I've seen you in Singapore, isn't it? Yeah, we've met each other. Then he needs to explain himself because he's feeling obviously very odd that here's a priest and well, the scriptures say you're not supposed to have a glass of whiskey. And here he's having a whiskey and being very relaxed, thinking that the whole of Singapore he has left behind. Then he got a Singaporean on Air India Express. What I'm trying to tell you is, in today's age, this is common. It happens. But in those days, it was not. So when suddenly this Gopal Chapal put all these items outside Srivas Thakur's house, the people thought Srivas Thakur is a hypocrite. He says he's somebody, but actually he's somebody else. This is not good. Why should we be hypocritical? If you want to smoke, admit you are smoking. That's better than saying, I don't want to smoke, I don't smoke, and then you have your pockets filled with cigarettes. Which is better? Better to be honest. Better to be honest. But so this is a very serious thing. So when Mahaprabhu Nimai heard about what Gopal Chapal had done, he became very angry. But he never did it. When Gopal Chapal went home, the next morning when he woke up, he found that he was afflicted by leprosy. Today, leprosy is not that major disease. But in those days in ancient India, or even in in the centuries of 14th, 15th century, leprosy was a killer. You would never be able to be cured. Blood and pus was oozing out from all his bodies. He was having sores all over himself. And he was practically dying. Why? Because of the sinful reaction that he got for unnecessarily trying to cause harm to others. And this is a practical point, ladies and gentlemen. The fact is, all scriptures tell us, as you sow, so shall you reap. We should be very careful in how we behave. Because whatever we do today will always have consequences. And if you do good things and mean well, then you will always be protected. But if you don't do good things and don't mean well, then you must be ready to be accountable to the effects of such activities. Gopal Chapal suffered. He was about to die. When at that point of time, Nimai Pandit Chaitanya Mahaprabhu passes by and sees Gopal Chapal crying and crying. And where is he? At the bottom of a tree, right at the end of the village. He has become an outcast. An outcast. He wanted to make Srivas Thakur an outcast. He becomes an outcast. Can you imagine that? And at that point of time, what happens? Chaitanya Mahaprabhu comes. Gopal Chapal falls at the feet of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and says, please forgive me. Please forgive me. And he's genuine. But what does Mahaprabhu do? He says, I cannot forgive you. You should go and seek the forgiveness of one whom you have harmed. Because he is dear to me. If he forgives you, I'm ready to forgive you. Which is a very important concept in all spiritual and in major religions. The devotees of the Lord are very important, as important, or more cherished even by the Lord than anyone else. The Lord considers worship of his devotees. The Lord considers glorification of his devotees to be even greater than glorification of himself. So what does Mahaprabhu do? Mahaprabhu then tells him to go back to Srivas Thakur. And Srivas Thakur, of course, forgives him. And his leprosy goes. One day, and this is another subject of a drama that will be happening after this. One day, Nityanand Prabhu, who is actually none other than Balram, an incarnation of Lord, and the right-hand man of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had many friends known as associates. And one of them was Haridas, and the other was Nityanand. So Mahaprabhu told Nityanand and Haridas Thakur, go out and meet everyone and tell everyone to chant. So they go out, and as they're going out, they meet two people who are considered to be the greatest of villains in that area. They were known as Jagai and Madai, right? They were two brothers, born into good parentage, but took up all the bad habits you can possibly conceive. Half the day they were drunk, half the day they were beating people, they were stealing, they were committing all kinds of acts of debauchery. And at that point of time, nobody cared to even come close to them. They all avoided them. And at that point of time, Nityanand Prabhu and Haridas Thakur, they go up to him and what do they say? They tell Jagai and Madai, please chant the holy names of the Lord. People thought they were mad. Jagai and Madai, they look at these two persons and they think, we should beat them up. So what do? They start running after Nityanand Prabhu and Haridas Thakur. Haridas Thakur and Nityanand Prabhu are shocked. They run too. And they run away to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And when they go there, they tell Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we tried to get them to chant, that's all, but they came to beat us. Mahaprabhu says, don't worry. Very soon, they will chant the holy names. Another day, what happens? Jagai and Madai, they are drunkards, so they live anywhere. One day they happen to come close by the house of Mahaprabhu. And every night they stay there. Every night they are drunk. But every night what's happening in Mahaprabhu's house? Chanting of the holy names of the Lord. So while these two drunkards are drinking, they are also hearing the names. And as they hear the names, they start dancing because they are drunk. They don't care what dance it is, what music it is, but they just dance. But they don't realize that the chanting is purifying their hearts. The next day, they are actually walking. Nityanand Prabhu actually comes up to Chaitanya. They come up to Jagai and Madai. And at that point of time, what does Nityanand Prabhu do? He tells them again, sir, please chant the holy names of the Lord. Madai, one of the brothers, what does he do? He picks up one of the broken pots from his drinking and he hits Nityanand Prabhu on his head. And blood starts flowing. And at that point of time, the devotees are shocked. What does Nityanand Prabhu do? Instead of retaliating, running away, shouting, screaming, or coming to see a lawyer, what does he do? He just stands there and he begs. He begs to Madai, my dear sir, even if you kill me, I request you to please chant. And at that point of time, Jagai, the other brother, his heart melted. Because he said, who is this personality who is beaten and still maintains love towards us? Who does this today? Nobody does it today. And he tells his brother, stop Madai, don't beat him anymore. How can you do that? The name is purifying their hearts, unknown to them. And at that point of time, Mahaprabhu has heard that his associate has been hurt. He rushes there, and this time Mahaprabhu becomes very angry. He shows transcendental anger, and he says, for this terrible sin, you must be punished with death. And at that point of time, Nityanand Prabhu falls at the feet of Mahaprabhu. And he tells them, my Lord, you forget why you came. You didn't come to kill people. That's being done every day anyway. You have come to deliver people. Give them the best that you can give. Give them love of God and give them the chanting of the holy name. And what does he do? Chaitanya Mahaprabhu then says, I will do that because you have asked me. He embraces Jagai and he embraces Madai and he prays and tells them, makes them promise, you will never ever repeat this. And when they accept it with full repentance, they become great devotees of the Lord. And this shows us something. There is nothing in this world where forgiveness cannot be achieved if you are in contact with God. Forgiveness and redemption is a very important concept. It must come from love. In this world, many people don't forgive us for the things we have done. And very often we get very hurt. And we don't realize we also don't forgive people. And they also become hurt. But the highest form of love is that there will always be a road for us to walk on. And That is the beauty of what Mahaprabhu showed us. We must always remember what he says at the end. Every saint has a past, and every sinner has a future. We should never forget that. And there's one other point that Jesus said very nicely in the Bible. He said, hate the sins, but do not hate the sins. Very important. And that is how we grow. That's how we grow in our character. We don't hate people, but we hate the sins, but we never hate them. They are two different things. And Mahaprabhu showed us that. He actually showed us that. Lakshmi Priya, his wife, dies of a snake bite. And after she dies, Mahaprabhu, at the behest of his mother, marries again a devotee known as Vishnu Priya. One day, Mahaprabhu is chanting the names of the Lord. And while he's chanting very nicely, he becomes ecstatic. At that point of time, some of his students, because he's still teaching, they look at him and say, he's a madman. They say that, why are you chanting and chanting? In other words, suddenly Mahaprabhu realizes one thing. He realizes that people are not going to hear me now because familiarity is there. Have you found that to be a disease today? Familiarity breeds contempt, they say. If someone is so familiar to you, if they give you good counsel, chances are you don't hear them. If someone else comes and tells you, you know, this should not be done, same thing that the person next to you said, then you hear them. How many times has it happened to you? It happened to me a lot. Very often they say, oh, you're too young, you're not up to the mark. But an old man could be repeating the same thing that you say, but they will not hear you. So Mahaprabhu decided now that if people want to hear me, if I am supposed to actually fulfill my mission to deliver the fallen souls of this age, then I must do one thing. I must make them respect me in such a way that they have to come and they have to hear me. And so Mahaprabhu makes a very, very big decision at this stage of his life. He decides that he will give up householder life. He decides he will give up the life of marriage. He goes into what we call the life of a renunciate. He shaves his head and he renounces all family connections and he becomes a full-time monk, so to speak. And what does he do? When he does that, we must remember one thing. The Lord did that as a great act of sacrifice. Because it is very difficult to leave your home for a higher cause. Very difficult to leave the comfort of your wife and your children for a higher cause. Many of us will live and die in our homes. Very few of us may want to go and perform a high mission. But it was needed and necessary, and therefore the Lord did that. And this is where there is a nice verse, that is stated here. In Bhagavatam it is stated that great personalities